Okay, so welcome back, and hope you enjoyed Doon Castle. We've got, we're just going to be driving about 30 minutes now. We're going to cross into the Highlands, and we're going to take a stop at a beautiful Highland loch or lake called Loch Lubnaig. We'll take a stop, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, just to enjoy the views. If you've missed the restrooms there are restrooms at the next stop, and an opportunity to grab perhaps a quick coffee as well, if you've not had a chance to get one this morning. And then we'll continue our way up into the kind of West Highlands sort of proper. But we're just about to drive through the actual town of Doon, and the town of Doon is quite typical of this town's quite typical of the kind of historic, what we would call market towns in lowland Scotland. So market town, or a market town, the type of market town that you'd have all along this Highland lowland border between these two parts of Scotland. Land use very different from in the Highlands and from the lowlands as a result of the difference in geology and the difference in soil. And what you'll see in the areas that we're going to today, there's not much growing of crops going on. Well, you wouldn't necessarily get it at this time of year anyway, but you'll see that the land that is used for agriculture in the Highlands is used for livestock, grazing of cattle and sheep. This is not land that you can grow crops for human consumption on. So this cross here, this is not a cross, but what we'll call a market cross or a market cross. This signifies that this is a market town, a town that's got a licence to have local markets. That's why it's got a lion at the top of it. If you find one of these market crosses that's got a unicorn at the top, then it means it's a royal borough, and that means that they have a licence from the monarchy to hold international markets, so people can come internationally and trade. But this was a local market town, and we've got quite a few passengers on board today from the United States of America. And this town, Doon, is a town that has quite a significant connection to your country that you might not be aware of. And it's quite an important one. So, despite being a busy little market town for many, many years, back in the 1600s, there was a local blacksmith in the town of Doon, called Thomas Cadell, and he diversified away from his usual blacksmithing work into the production of firearms, in particular flintlock pistols, and these were what became known as Doon pistols. So Thomas Cadell set up shop. These pistols were very, very popular. That kick-started basically a gun industry in the town. More gunsmiths came and set up, and Doon pistols became very, very famous. Beautiful weapons, obviously quite primitive, flintlock pistols, but beautifully engraved and decorated with very intricate metalwork, artisanship, really stunning items. There's actually a heritage centre in the town that has a nice collection of them. And Doon pistols had a very distinctive looking kind of trigger system, and also a very distinctive butt on the end of the gun, what was known as a scroll butt. So if you imagine a flintlock pistol, you're going to get one shot off with that, and if you happen to miss the guy, then you're out of bullets, you're not going to have time to reload. So the idea was you turn it round and you wallop them on the head with the back of the gun. And so this kind of scroll butt was kind of like the end of a mace, and the idea was to, if you missed, to try and do what you need to do with it, using the kind of the weapon as a kind of club. And these Doon pistols were highly sought after, and indeed still are. Gun collectors go kind of mad for them, and the kind of things that you'd find in museums. They can change hands for significant kind of money. And back in the 16 and 1700s, if you were a Highland clan chieftain, like the Duke of Argyll perhaps, or you were a lowland aristocrat, or you were maybe a military officer from a wealthy family, a second son, not likely to inherit anything, so you have to go off and seek your own fortunes throughout the empire. Well, if you were one of these well-heeled people, then you would want a set of Doon pistols strapped to your waist, because they would mark you out not only as a man of action, but someone of style and sophistication and taste and wealth and what have you. But the reason it's significant to our friends from the United States of America is they say it was a Doune pistol that fired the first shot of the American Revolutionary War. So you have the gunsmiths of Doune, Colin, to thank for your freedom from the evil imperial reign of the British Empire. That's right, you might be talking like me if it wasn't for the gunsmiths of Doune. So yeah, it's a true story. Apparently a Doune pistol, you know, set the whole thing in motion, and the weapon itself, I believe, is held in a museum in Massachusetts somewhere. But yeah, Doune pistol set you on your path to world domination and independence. And if it's okay with you, we might request to borrow that pistol back at some point over the coming years here in Scotland, depending on how the next few years go. But yeah, Doune pistol, there you go. But yeah, it's a shame that this visibility's not been so good, because on a nice, relatively clear day, then what we actually see is ourselves approaching what we refer to as the Highland Line, this geological boundary that separates these two, or cuts these two parts, Scotland into two halves. And it is just that. Yeah, it's a line. You approach a ridge line of mountains. There's no gradual ascent into the Highlands. Those that have been there will know this already. There's no gradual ascent. You just cross the line and you're there. And in the space of a couple of 100 metres, the landscape just changes. It goes from this, kind of relatively gentle rolling, cultivated fields, patchwork of farmland. And in the space of a couple of 100 metres, you're just, again, pretty much surrounded by mountains. Now, one of the first things you might notice when we cross into the Highlands of Scotland, if we can see them, and this is particularly important for my French friends from Strasbourg, is that one of the first things you might notice about the Highlands of Scotland is that, number one, they're actually not very high. Okay, so this is, in terms of elevation, this is a fairly modest mountain range of modest height. Tallest mountains that we have in Scotland are between 4,000 and 4,500 feet. I think the tallest gets just a little over 4,500 feet, so 1,500 metres. So probably nothing compared to what you're used to. Similarly, if you've been to the Rockies, or the Alps, the Himalayas, what have you, it's not going to it's not going to necessarily blow your mind. But there are lots of them, and if it does clear, the scenery is great because you can see so many of them. And if you've got the energy and are fit enough to do so, once you start climbing these mountains, it becomes very addictive, because most of them are pretty accessible. You can be at the top of some of the tallest in maybe 4 hours, and because they're not very high, the views are really quite spectacular. So hill walking and climbing is a very popular pastime for people all over this country. Yes, Ben Nevis is the highest mountain, not just in Scotland, in the UK as well. So yeah, just over 4,500 feet. I forget exactly the number, but there are quite a few mountains between 4,000 and 4,500. But yeah, Ben Nevis is the tallest. It's actually not a particularly interesting. If you take the usual route to the top, it's actually not. It's a fairly mundane slog up it. There are more exciting routes that you can take to the top if you're a bit more kind of experienced, or you're perhaps like climbing. It's a bit of a just lump of a mountain, but the north face of the Ben is basically a 700 foot high sheer volcanic cliff face. So if you're into traditional kind of climbing, whatever, ropes, then that's a much more exciting route and visually stimulating route to the top. There's also if you know what you're doing, there's another kind of ridge line a rent that you can take to the top, where you get beautiful views of the North Face all the way there. But for the vast majority of people that climb it, you got what's known as the mountain path, the tourist path. It's just a relentless slog because you're going from sea level. So I mean, you're climbing the full kind of height of it. There are much more exciting mountains, I would say, that are maybe a little bit more modest, but probably a more enjoyable day out than Ben Nevis. And I'd say probably 9 out of 10 days the top is obscured with cloud anyway, so the chances of getting a good view at the top are relatively kind of remote. But if you have to climb the tallest mountain in the UK, then you have to climb the tallest mountain in the UK. I think that's what attracts most people to it. The town we're just coming through now is called Callander. And you see once we get into the town, it's again, there's probably been human occupation in this area for as long as, you know, people have been farming this land. So going back probably about 6,000 years, there'll have been a permanent settlement here of some description. Romans had a presence here as well when they tried and failed to conquer Scotland. But Callander sits right on the Highland line. So you see this kind of tree covered, I don't know if you see tree covered kind of hill disappearing off into the clouds up ahead. That is the Highland line, and it is just that. So you just basically hit a ridge line of hills or mountains running from coast to coast diagonally across Scotland, and across that line you're in the Highlands. And we go from this gentle flat landscape to basically that very mountainous hilly kind of landscape. Just almost kind of sort of instantly. But Callander's very typical, despite this being an ancient settlement. This is a development of the 19th century, and this is very typical of towns that you will find along railway lines all over Scotland. Towns that took advantage of the opportunities, the commercial opportunities that railway traffic brought to these more remote areas, in particular tourism. So you know, if you were around in, you know, late 18th century Scotland, and you'd, you know, maybe you would, like some of you probably have, you maybe come up from maybe London, for example, as part of a tour, and you might, you know, said to people, you know, what are you going to do in Scotland? So you're going to enjoy Edinburgh? And you say, yeah, and say, well, what are you going to do? You're going to, you know, and say, no, actually, we're going to head up into the Highlands of Scotland. Well, people would have thought you were stark raving mad. They would have said, why would you go up to the Highlands of Scotland? These strange barbarian weirdly dressed people with their unusual language and their barbaric ways. You know, if you said you were going to the Highlands of Scotland, you know, people would have thought that you had some grand ambition to be robbed and mugged and beaten up and left for dead by the roadside. Or certainly that would have been the impression of people from the south. Not just the south of Britain, the south of Scotland as well. Periods of unrest and civil war had ingrained in the consciousness of those from the south, those that might identify more as British rather than Scottish, would have thought of these people of the north as they would have been very much looked down upon as an inferior kind of people in many ways. And however, 19th century, that all kind of starts to kind of change in the respect that because of the work of and indeed what was actually Highland culture during this period was kind of rebranded, not as Highland culture but as kind of Scottish culture, and this kind of makes it more accessible or more acceptable from those from the south. Railway travel was opening up this area, the Highlands, to tourism for the first time, and the popularity of the Highlands went as high as the monarchy. The Queen that ruled throughout much of the 19th century in Britain, Queen Victoria, enjoyed Scotland. She loved the Highlands. She loved coming to the Highlands on holiday, famously buying the Balmoral estate and building Balmoral Castle. The royal family's very popular holiday destination for them. And you know, because the Queen likes coming here, it makes it a very fashionable place to come. People start to forget about this wild past and this wild and unpopular history, and people start to really celebrate, you know, particularly through the works of authors, you know, tales of daring do and swashbuckling Highland heroes, these rogues getting up to all sorts of adventures, and obviously if it's good enough for the Queen, it's good enough for the rest, you know, for everyone else. And so people started to flock here in their droves, and so towns like Callander, which used to have a railway line running through it, took full advantage of these tourist numbers and started to develop these sort of very romantic tourist hubs for Victorian tourists, 19th century tourists to come and enjoy the fancy lodgings in the hotels and the guest houses, and go on coach tours up to these beauty spots, and enjoy the fresh air and the lack of pollution, and bathe in the waters, go fishing, go hunting, you know, some Highland cows on the right, go deer stalking, and climb the mountains, and you know, enjoy all these Victorian gentlemanly pursuits that people had in abundance here on their doorstep in Scotland. The other reason that this area started to become popular for tourism as well was largely because Europe, for a long period, was pretty much off limits. Back in the day, if you were someone of means, you had wealth, you had money, you'd perhaps finish your education, and before settling down to perhaps a family and a career, you might go off on what was known as a grand tour. You'd head off to Europe, to the great cities of Italy or France or Spain, or maybe you'd head to Greece or North Africa, and you'd explore all the ancient historic sites, and you'd buy up works of art and furniture, or you'd procure antiquities from the great archaeological sites in Egypt or what have you, and collect samples of natural history. You would draw and paint what you saw, and then you'd send all that stuff home and furnish your home with it, so when people came to visit, you know, they would see what a well-travelled and cultured person you were through your, you know, and had become through your travels. But ultimately the Napoleonic Wars in the early 19th century really put a stop to that. It made parts of Europe unsafe, unpopular, unfashionable to go. And again, just about that time, Scotland was opening up as a result of the railway service. So the north really hoovered up a lot of that sort of grand tourism sort of traffic as well. But we're just kind of now crossing the sort of Highland line, so a few twists and turns aside, and you should notice good change in the landscape. And then as we continue for the next, I mean really up until probably until about 4:30 this afternoon, you're just going to be surrounded by a completely different landscape. but the loch itself just wraps around the base of this mountain, Ben Ledi on the left. So looking quite busy, seems to be a lot of kind of kayakers out, I think, because the rivers are flowing quite high, so hopefully we can get stopped in here. Sometimes the car park just fills up, but I shouldn't imagine it would be today. And we'll take a stop just to enjoy the lovely colours and the views of the water. And yeah, if you need to use the restrooms, do use these, because the next time we stop for restrooms is going to be in Inverary, which is going to be the lunch stop, which is probably going to be, probably about 1:15, 1:30, I should think, by the time we get there. And there's a wee cafe here, and you won't have time to order any hot food here, but they do bits of cake to take away and kind of, packets of crisps and that. But you would be able to get yourself a hot drink here. If you're going to get a hot drink, what I'd say is head straight to the cafe and get that ordered. It's not massively quick service, so yeah, go and get a coffee and then see what time you've got for enjoying the views and for scenery. Get the feeling it's gonna be one of those days. Right. Right, what to do, guys? I'm gonna let you off the vehicle, and if you just want to jump off the vehicle just now, and we aim just to be back on the bus ready to go in about, let's say about 15 minutes. In fact, let's say 20 minutes. 20 minutes. So my watch, that would be at 11:50. We'll catch you ready to go in 20 minutes. Okay, no worries.
Is there a problem? Is there a problem?
I want to take my picture. Do you want to take my picture? wanted the mountain. This guy's mountain. Yeah, I just have to cut that girl out.
Okay, thank you. Tell mommy, stop taking pictures. This is every trip with me and mommy.
What?
The picture crap.
Yes.
That's a girl thing.
Here, you have to take a picture of me and Ryan. Ryan, come be in a picture. Here, we'll be on this background.
I wish you didn't have a cell phone.
Then what would I do? I wouldn't be able to take pictures.
Is that a good picture? Fuck me. I'm born this way. I think it's clear enough. I'm gonna hang out with those Asian girls. They're not real Asian. I don't know if they are. I like my Asians like Japanese. So maybe a Japanese girl. They take less pictures. All kinds of people are dying.
That person that went into the building is dead?
No. She's just causing problems.
just relax, enjoy the drive now that things are starting to clear up a wee bit. Lovely little section of road we're going to be on. We're going to be travelling, you know, past lochs, rivers, through straths, through glens. So the few Gaelic words there for you. I mentioned that the people of the Highlands, you know, might have been considered to speak a foreign and strange language by those from the south back in the 18th century, and that's because they did speak a different language. The people of the Highlands of Scotland spoke a completely different dialect to that which was spoken in lowland Scotland, and had a very different origin as well. The people of the Highlands spoke what was referred to as the Gaelic language, and this is based on an ancient Celtic Irish language called Gaelic, which was introduced to the west of Scotland back in probably about the 4th or 5th century, and which developed from the Irish Gaelic language into what we refer to as the Scottish or Gaelic language. And the two languages have been diverging for 1500 years, so from what I understand there are significant differences between them, but a lot of similarities as well. Lowland Scotland spoke a different language completely, a language of Germanic origin that was introduced into the north of England back in the 6th century. An old Germanic dialect that we refer to as Old English or Old Northumbrian, which made its way up into lowland Scotland and developed into what we refer to as Lowland Scots, which is Old English or Old Northumbrian is the language that the modern English language is based on, and the same can be said of Lowland Scots. So as an English speaker, there's a lot of the Lowland Scots language that you will be able to recognise and you know, interpret as English, but there is a lot of words used in Lowland Scots which still retain a much more sort of Germanic or Dutch influence in the language than you will find in modern kind of English. So different languages. Now, although the Gaelic language almost completely died out in Scotland as a result of, well, persecution of the Highland communities in the late 18th century, but also as a result of mass migration of people away from the Highlands towards the end of the 18th, early 19th centuries. A lot of these native Gaelic speakers left Scotland, and the lack of population in the north meant that the language almost completely disappeared. Nowadays there's about 1% of our population, Scottish population, about 60,000 people that speak Gaelic as a native tongue. And these are people that would tend to, you know, the communities that tend to be located up in the northwest of Scotland are out in the Hebridean Islands, which are the islands out in the Atlantic off the northwest coast of Scotland. But despite the small number of Gaelic speakers that remain in Scotland, there are Gaelic words that we still use in everyday life. And loch is one example. The word loch basically means a body of water. So in the case of Loch Lubnaig and various other lochs that we're going to see this morning on our drive up, these basically describe, you know, a freshwater lake. However, from lunchtime onwards, we're going to see other styles of lochs which are not freshwater, they're saltwater. So what we refer to as sea lochs. And what I guess in Scandinavia you might describe as a fjord, perhaps. I'm not sure what the different definition is specifically, or in North America as an inlet, perhaps. But these are not freshwater lakes. These are just, I don't know if you recall that map of Scotland I showed you this morning, or if you look at a map of Scotland, the west coast of Scotland looks like a very fractured landscape. Lots of little peninsulas of land and islands off the west coast, and in between these you have bodies of seawater, effectively the Atlantic Ocean. And in many cases these bits of seawater, these inlets, are also described as lochs, but sea lochs. So Inverary sits on the shores of Loch Fyne, which is a sea loch, and we're going to see another one called Loch Long later on this afternoon as well. So both described as lochs, but very different types of bodies of water, if you like. We're currently driving through an area, I don't know if you saw the sign there, called Strathire. Strathire is the name of this village, but it's actually also the name of this valley that we're coming through just now. As you'll see, Loch Lubnaig was in the valley as well, and this is what we refer to as a kind of wider, flatter bottomed valley. And this word Strath, if you've been to Glasgow, those going to Glasgow, you will be in a valley called Strathclyde. Strathclyde in the Clyde Valley, again, is a wide, flat bottomed valley. This is where the city of Glasgow sits. And that's what the word Strath means. It's a Gaelic word that describes these wide, flat bottomed valleys. We're going to come through Strathire. We're going to come through a village called Loch Head. There's going to be another freshwater loch on your right hand side. And then we're going to go up through an area called Glen Ogle. And Glen Ogle is another valley, but the word Glen, and if you're a fan of whisky, you'll be familiar with this word because it's particularly exclusively Scotch whisky. You'll see a lot of brand names that have the word Glen in them. And if you see a distillery, a whisky, Glenmorangie, Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, Glenfarclas, what have you, what that means is that the distillery is located in a valley, but specifically a narrow or bottomed or V-shaped valley, and that's what Glen means. It means a narrow bottomed V-shaped valley. Both are a result of glaciation, but whereas a glen, a shallow bottomed valley, is carved out of the landscape by ice, these wide flat bottomed valleys, these straths, are a result of river erosion, essentially huge glacial rivers which have once passed through this landscape and eroded out or carved out these wider kind of valleys. But still, Gaelic words that we use in kind of everyday Scottish English language, essentially. But for now, just relax, enjoy this lovely drive. If you've got any questions, shout out. But I'll leave you to just soak up the scenery and leave you with your own thoughts. Very quickly, are you okay for temperature in the back? Feeling okay? this is Glen Ogle we're coming through just now. It's quite a beautiful valley, but notable for a bridge at the top of the valley. We're on the left hand side, the Glen Ogle Viaduct. I mentioned that the town of Callander used to be on a railway line, hence its its prosperity back in the 19th century. But the railway line used to come through this valley, and as we drive up, you'll see on the left hand side of the valley where the line used to be is an area very, very prone for landslide. And this is a valley which does get a lot of landslide, but you'll be pleased to know that it's not the most notorious road for landslide. We will be on that road this afternoon, Colin, so you've got all that to look forward to. But it's only really an issue after periods of heavy rain. Oh wait, said too much. But the Glen Ogle Viaduct is quite a lovely railway bridge, and it used to be a railway bridge, now part of a long distance walk and cycleway called the Rob Roy Way, one of many such long distance routes that you can take on foot through this wonderful landscape. The Glen Ogle Viaduct will be on your left hand side. shortly be turning off this road and starting to head a bit more kind of due west down towards Inveraray. And in about 15 minutes there and thereabouts, we're going to take a stop to enjoy a view of another ruined castle. This one dates to the mid sort of 1400s. A castle called Killearn Castle. And despite being a ruin, you can't actually get into the castle. It's all kind of locked up for maintenance, so it's not safe to go into. And the walk out to it's through a boggy kind of field. It's not something we're able to actually access, but we will stop by the roadside to get a lovely view of the building. And it is Killearn Castle does sit in one of the most beautiful sites, romantic sites, arguably of any castle in Scotland. It sits at the head of a freshwater loch called Loch, framed with the Ben Cruachan mountain range behind it. It really is quite atmospheric, and you'll be getting a view of it across the water. So we'll take a short stop there, about 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes to enjoy the view, and then from there we're about 30 minutes, maybe 25-30 minutes drive into Inveraray itself, where we'll have a longer stop for lunch, and for those that wish to go into the castle, give you the opportunity to sort of do that as well. But we're now driving down through Glen Lochie, and shortly, if you keep your eyes peeled, you will see signs heading off to the right hand side for a valley called Glen Orchy. Now, my name is Fletcher, David Fletcher, and the Fletchers apparently were the first to inhabit the valley of Glen Orchy, and we lived a peaceful and humble existence there until the Campbells came along and stole it from us. But we don't go on about it was a long time ago, Colin, so we just need to get over these things. And the reason for the Campbells taking our land away from us was to do with the expansion of the Campbell territory and influence, and that sort of leads into why Killearn Castle was built. So again, if you imagine the Campbells start to raise to, come to prominence, really by about the times the first wars of independence have kind of finished, so 1330s, something like that. And then in the late 1300s, the supporters of the early kind of Stuart monarchs, so by the time you get to the middle of the 15th century, they are very well established now as one of the main sort of players, or one of the prominent players in terms of kind of Highlands sort of politics, if you like. And so as their territory expanded, a younger son of this 15th century clan chieftain was allowed to go forward and basically build the castle that you're going to see. When you had very prominent, very dominant sort of clan factions, what was most common, really from about the 12th century onwards, was that if a clan chieftain died, the title of clan chieftain and the right to inherit the land and the property had fallen by that point to the eldest son of the family. And the problem that some of these clan chieftains had was that, if you maybe had more than one son, and one of your younger sons showed great promise, they were maybe a very capable character, very ambitious, with maybe perhaps at times would showcase the ruthless streak required to lead. Well, if you've got multiple sons, this can sometimes pose a problem, and then the last thing that you want is for your oldest son to accidentally fall down a flight of stairs in the family castle, or perhaps go missing on a fishing trip with his younger brother. So if you had a young and rather promising, kind of son, a younger but promising son, you'd sometimes allow them to go forth and form what was known as a cadet branch of the clan, a junior branch of the clan. They could go off and seek their own fortune. So this is why Killearn Castle was built. A younger son of the Campbell chieftain back in the mid-15th century, was awarded lands on the what was at that point the frontier of Campbell territory, at the head of Loch Awe. And the loch that we're going to see, the castle we're going to see, actually protects a very, or what was a very strategic valley or pass. If you wanted to effectively invade the west coast of Scotland in this area, the town of Inveraray, from land, you had to basically come through this mountain pass. It was known as the Pass of Brander, and it is protected by this castle, Cullarn Castle. So he was given the responsibility to defend this frontier of Campbell territory, very important place, and so he built Colin Campbell of Glenorchy, he was known, built this castle. But Colin Campbell himself was again a very ambitious young man, and he found influence and favour with the Stuart monarchy himself, and so no sooner had he finished building this castle then he was awarded territories further to the west. So the Campbell territory east, and so Campbell territory started to grow and grow and grow, and the Campbell frontier moved from where this castle was further to the east. So this Colin Campbell at one point owned so much land, he built so many castles, that you could have at one point walked from the east coast of Scotland to the west coast and never leave Campbell territory. They were rather sort of prolific, and so sometime later this castle fell into disuse. It was hit by lightning a few times. Last used in the early 18th century as a garrison for troops loyal to the monarchy during a period of civil war here, but ultimately it was abandoned and sort of left to ruin. But it's quite a beautiful ruin nonetheless. But if you plot a path from here to the east, quite literally to the east coast of Scotland, you'll see a trail of Campbell castles, and certainly from here to parts of the Firth of Forth in the east, many of which were actually built by the guy, or commissioned by the guy who built this castle that you're going to get a short stop at. This copper coloured plant on the right hand side is one of the plants that really dominates this kind of landscape. It's known as bracken, and during the season, spring to autumn, it's a big bushy sort of fern-like plant that just loves the soils here. The geology of the Highlands is much harder than the geology that we get in the lowlands of Scotland, and so in flatter areas like this, when it rains, the rock is so hard it's impervious, so the rainwater's got nowhere to go, and so it just sits in the soil, and it basically leads to very kind of waterlogged, boggy soils. And there are a few plants that really enjoy this kind of landscape. The bracken is one. The other one's a plant you'll see all over the roadsides here, and actually all over the mountainsides in the moorland is this heather. This small kind of bushy shrub-like plant, which again provides a tremendous amount of colour to the landscape, but only really in the month of August, where for 1 month, and pretty much 1 month only, the heather blooms a beautiful purple flower, which just basically leads to blankets of purple all over the landscape, all over the mountains and the open moorland for a period of about 4 to 6 weeks, but it's really quite beautiful. Apart from that, the trees that you're seeing around you are not native. These plantations, these big blocks of these Christmas trees looking like conifers, these are not native pine trees. These are Scandinavian conifer trees that again like this environment. They seem to enjoy the soils here, and a type of tree that grows very, very quickly, and for that reason they're used for commercial forestry. plantations. So pretty much all these trees you see around you here, very densely planted, will just be harvested. You'll have seen areas that we've driven past that have just been clear cut, the timber harvested, and I think vast majority of this stuff will just be pulped down, turned into kind of cardboard and paper and what have you. They don't, you know, at one point this land would have been covered in thick indigenous forests, really up until, well, you know, when the Romans arrived in the 1st century AD, they called Scotland, you know, Caledonia, land of the Great Forest, despite the fact people had been farming the land in Scotland for the best part of 4,000 years by the time the Romans arrived. Still, it would appear the vast majority of the landscape was covered with thick forest. Down in the lowlands of Scotland, oak-dominated forests, with ash and alder and you know, hazel and fruitwoods and what have you, birch and some pine as well. But up here in the Highlands, again, a landscape dominated by pine, but not by this stuff, by a particular species of pine that we refer to here in Scotland as Scots pine or Caledonian pine. You'll find it all over the Northern Hemisphere. Very different looking tree. If you see any, I'll point it out. They don't look like Christmas trees anyway. Far fewer branches. They tend to be higher up, but you can always identify the Scots pine by this wonderful orange tinge it has to its bark. Really, really beautiful trees. So up here, predominantly Caledonian pine and birch and rowan, but you know, could have been deciduous trees as well. But yeah, most of what we see now, deforestation in Scotland's native forest was largely complete by the mid-18th century as a result of, you know, industries and people clearing land for farming, but predominantly shipbuilding. You know, if you imagine this, you know, British Isles being a series of island nations essentially, ships were so important for trade, for communication, for navies as well, and a lot of these great wooden sort of merchant ships, warships, required tremendous amounts of timber, and so deforestation was a gradual thing, but shipbuilding, you know, played a big part in that deforestation. And by the mid 18th century, most of that native forest had sort of largely gone. So although what you see around you just now is a beautiful landscape, it's very much a man-made sort of starred landscape. You know, this land should be covered in forests of pine and birch, you know, up to a height of probably about 1,500, you know, 2,000 feet. You see now predominantly these plantations are what dominate the landscape. The plantations as well are, and to ensure the trees grow nice and straight, which makes them, which increases the yield for the landowner, but also makes it much easier to harvest the forest using machines. They plant the trees very close together, very densely. And what that means is that no sunlight really hits the forest floor in these commercial plantations, and as a result, nothing really grows in there. So there are, I suppose, benefits people would argue in terms of carbon capture for offsetting carbon emissions, that sort of thing, by planting these forests. But with the exception of that, they don't really bring any benefit to the natural kind of ecosystem. These plantations don't provide you know, areas that can be exploited by native kind of wildlife, mammals, and to some extent birds. So many of these sort of native species of Scotland, Scottish mammal, sort of the red squirrel and the Highland wildcat and the pine marten and the capercaillie, badgers and such like are in fairly low numbers because of the lack of natural habitat for them to exploit. Now, assuming we can stop here, because as I say, there's not a tremendous amount of space, please just, I'll try and sort of manage the sort of traffic side of things, but just be super careful, because the road that we're going to be on, getting off the vehicle, there's not much space in the parking bays, but the speed limit on the road is 60 miles an hour for regular cars. So there will be people driving down here, at times like maniacs. So, I'll see where we can get parked, and then I'll maybe give you some advice as to how to stay safe. But yeah, please don't take any chances by standing too close to the road unnecessarily, or perhaps trying to cross the road unnecessarily. And hopefully just have a short stop, nice and safely, and allow you to get get some fresh air and enjoy this sport. It should be quite a beautiful view. Here on the left hand side, ideally we want to be on the other side of the road, so we are going to have to cross the road here. So I'll kind of try and assist and keep it as safe as we can. I'm just going to come back a wee bit actually. So we can try and through your side. Right, I think the best way to do this. So what we'll do, if we're okay, what we're going to do is open the door, and we're going to walk, if we can, to the rear of the vehicle on this side, and then I'll just manage when we can cross nice and safely, keep an eye on the traffic. And if we do the same on the way back, we'll cross the road to the back of the vehicle and walk up this side of it so that we can get in the door unimpeded. Okay, so yeah, cool. So I'm just going to quickly pop my wing mirror in. So you'll see, if you want to, you can get into that field on the other side. It will be like an absolute bog. So pretty much as far as where that guy's standing is as far as I'd recommend you go if you're going to go into the field to get a little bit closer. You might get a little bit closer, but basically where that castle is, where those people are on the other side of the water, that used to be an island, and this loch's been dammed to provide hydroelectric power, so the water level's lower than it used to be. So what that means is all that land down there in the field, that all used to be under water. So it's just, it's after heavy rain, it's just a bog. So if you wish to go into the field, climb over the stile, go as far as you want, but I wouldn't really go any further than where that sort of dead tree is, to save yourself, going up to your ankles in mud or up to your knees in mud. We'll just take 10 minutes here to enjoy the view, and then we'll continue to.
Get to walk. Said walk. Said go into the trees. Stay off the road.
How you getting on? You want me to? I got it. You got it, nice. Yeah, just watch your. Some cows down there as well, absolutely inaccessible. To Oban, you would travel along there, and these great big hotels basically sprung up. They would have you'd basically get a train up from wherever, London to Edinburgh, and then the train would stop in this hotel, you get off, you'd be in the hotel, and then you'd do. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many, it's owned now by one of these big coach companies that just take people from one of their hotels to another, so I don't think it's used that much, but certainly back in the day. If anyone wants to pretty clear yourself, you go behind the vehicle and then you get easy access into the door. All good. But if you hang fire a wee second, guys, Be outside the castle, you just need to purchase a ticket to go into it. So if you look to your kind of right here, this is the sort of kind of private garden areas that the garden ticket will get you into. The full castle ticket will get you into the gardens as well. So that's the back of the castle.
It does look like a Disney castle.
Yeah, it does. It was used in I think a Christmas special of Downtown Abbey, if anyone's into that as well. So it has featured in television, television itself in the past. But I mean, it's a beautiful colour. The stones, I can't remember what it's made from, but beautiful colour with the stone. Now, to get to, if you want to go into the castle or just walk around the front of the castle, just basically where those people are coming out there, there's a little sign there. There's a ticket desk, hut type thing. Just go there, purchase a ticket if you wish to go in, and then go in and do your thing. It's signposted where the cafe is, and signposted where the garden entrance is as well. I think you can actually get into the cafe and gift shop without purchasing a ticket, I'm pretty sure. But the actual private gardens and the castle, you need to buy a ticket to get access. So, give me a wee second there. Just to save you a little bit of time, I'll just drop you at this bus stop, okay? But I'll pick you up on the one on the other side of the road. Again, leave anything that you don't want on the vehicle, and I'll see you either at that bus stop at 3 or up at the castle at 3:05. Any questions, grab me as you jump off.
Where are we going? Okay. What? I'm not going to do that. We just ate a lot, so. All those sweet memories.
What?
You just walk around.
Thankful, and if the clouds kind of clear enough, well, and the roads, I mentioned there was a road we were going to be driving on which was particularly notorious for landslide, and it is this mountain pass essentially. So we'll need to see if the road's open, there's a car park at the top and we can stop at the top. If visibility is okay, we'll do that and see if we can enjoy a view. If the cloud's too low, we might not see anything anyway, but hopefully we'll take a stop on our way to Luss. So we should be pulling in, assuming we manage to get a stop in, we should be pulling into Luss in about an hour's time. And Luss is a beautiful little conservation village that sits just on the shores of Loch Lomond itself. But if we drive around the top of Loch Fyne here, we're going to go over the mountain pass and then along the shores of another sea loch just in the next valley over called Loch Long, and then a short trip overland and down the shores of Loch Lomond to Luss. And we should have about half an hour in Luss. Hopefully there till, well, we'll be there till about 4:30 regardless. Sorry, Inverary Castle on your left. We'll be there till about 4:30 regardless, and then from there it's around about a 2-hour drive back into kind of Edinburgh. So we've got a bit of a slog to get us back to the city centre. First hour is actually quite a nice drive. If it's nice and clear, we'll be running parallel to the Highland line as we go, cross country, nice countryside, rolling countryside by that point, and then the last hour is basically on the road we took out this morning on the motorway back into the city centre. For 6:30 will be the eventual aim. But still some wonderful scenery coming up and lots to see. Hopefully you've got a good sort of appreciation now for just how different the landscape is north and south of that kind of Highland line. I know we could see a great deal of the lowland countryside as we left Edinburgh, but you know, essentially what you were seeing in the fields around you is really what the lowlands is like. Very, very different to where we are now. The reason that we've got these two very distinct parts of the country, and the reason that the transition between them is so immediate, is that if you were to go back far enough, and by this we're talking, you know, what the geologists think would be sort of 470 million years ago or more, then what you would have found is that actually the Highlands of Scotland and the lowlands of Scotland were actually originally part of two completely separate continents. The Highlands, the area we're in just now, was part of a large continent that also included, they think, North America and Greenland. This was a continent they refer to as Laurentia. The area that we came from this morning, lowland Scotland, was actually part of a completely separate continent that they refer to as Avalonia. This was a much larger continent that also included the land masses that are now obviously the rest of Europe, the south of Ireland, South America, Africa, large parts of Asia. And what we reckon happened was around about 470 million years ago, these two continents collided somewhere south of the equator, and this is a very slow collision, of course, these continents moving very slowly but with a tremendous amount of weight and power behind them. And as these continents eventually started to come together, the tropical ocean that separated them starts to disappear, the seabed itself is compacted and pushed up to the surface. And then as the two continents collide and push into each other, such is the pressure on the landscape that south of this collision point, a part of which is what we now recognise as the lowlands of Scotland, the earth starts to crack and basically falls into itself. Great fissures appear all over the earth's crust, and out of these eventually rise volcanoes, huge towering volcanoes. And we have evidence of this volcanic landscape all over lowland Scotland in the form of volcanic plugs or hill ranges that would have started off life as underground volcanic inclusions for many, many years. Lowland Scotland's actually spent a large portion of its history underwater, either serving as the shallow seabed of a tropical ocean, or indeed serving as the bed of huge rivers that we know once crossed that landscape. And so what we generally get in lowland Scotland in terms of geology is largely sandstone and limestone, much softer, more porous rock. So although lowland Scotland at one point would have been covered in towering volcanoes and hill ranges and mountain ranges and what have you, that's all gone now, because essentially as soon as these great glaciers that were crossing this landscape basically crossed this highland line that we crossed this morning on our way to Loch Lubnaig, these great glaciers would leave the hard rock of the highlands behind, hit the soft sandstone of the lowlands, where they just flattened the landscape. All these great volcanoes just wiped off the face of the planet by the erosive power of the ice, which subsequently exposed the internal plumbing system of these volcanoes, these volcanic plugs, these rounded kind of volcanic inclusions which now form most of Scotland's hill ranges, which ultimately should be deep underground but explodes through erosion as the glaciers flatten the rest of sort of lowland Scotland. So yeah, hence the reason for this dramatic change in scenery that we see as we cross this kind of highland line. And you'll see a perfect, Loch Lomond's a perfect visual example of this as well, because if you look at an aerial view of Loch Lomond, what you'll see is that it's an unusual shape. The loch is shaped almost like an elongated triangle, a stretched out triangle, because in the highland part of Loch Lomond, the loch's actually relatively narrow, but actually very, very deep. It gets up to about 600 feet deep. As glaciers were forced through the valley in the highland part of the loch, such was the strength of the mountains that the glacier was forced down a narrow channel. is open, so we'll take a wee stop, just literally 5 minutes here. This is Glen Crow that we're now looking down, and it's the clouds nice now. We'll just take a quick 5-minute stop to enjoy the view, and then we shall continue on our journey down to Loch Lomond and Lochs. Now this is Glen Crow, but this area is officially known as the Rest and Be Thankful. It's part of a network of a route of an old network of old military roads that were built back in the 18th century to bring the Highland clans to heel under the control of the governments of the day. But this is known as the Rest and Be Thankful.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you shouldn't, you can't fall. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Swan?
Yeah.
Hang on, I'll get you to what I'll do. This way. There you go, make it look like you're the only people here. Okay, there's a few there for you.
Thank
Of
you.
various apertures. You guys have a photo together? Yeah. Get on the bus because he's robbing people. Get out here because he's robbing people. Come on in. No problem. Yeah, yeah. No, you're alright, I'll do No problem. Hopefully a few of them will come out okay for you. Expect one in your fridge by the end of the month.
You want to go to an Everglades game? I have to decide that
So
soon.
high up.
We were in the Rockies. This is nothing.
Yes.
Right, we went to the Rockies. We were up 12,000 feet.
We went on top
13,000.
of Mount Washington.
We went on top of Pikes Peak.
Yeah, but our hotel was at 12,000. Cripple Creek, we had a hotel. It was at 11,000.
If Jason was
The
here,
hotel.
if Jason was here, I would probably just walk off the edge.
I want to make him hold my hand.
He'll drag you down with him.
No.
Alright, it's time to go. Watch the mud.
Where did I step in one before? Is it over there? Over there.
In the Highland Games, you know, quite good fun to go to. You know, say some are bigger than others. Some feel like just quite parochial little village fairs, whereas some, like Inverness for example, or on another level, Great Mar, are pretty well organised events that probably have, you know, hospitality care and all that sort of thing. But if you're not here, if anyone likes their sports of great strength, if you're not here during the Highland Game season, then there's dotted around the country what we call, I can't remember the right name for it, but basically lifting stones. So various villages and towns, or just sometimes in the countryside by the roadside, you'll find what are known as lifting stones. Just normally very smooth oval big lumps of rock that normally weigh, you know, at least 100 kilos, probably large great deal in excess of that, where you could just go around the country and challenge, you know, lifting these great, you know, lifting stones. And I think the various sites have different kind of, you know, competitions that you can compete in and then mark them down online. You're a bit like Strava, but for, you know, bit for power lifters, you know. I don't think we're going to pass any today, otherwise we'd get out and have a competition. No, I mean, I need the help of about 3 people to lift these things off the ground. I've had passengers do them before, but I mean, just without shock or, you know, you need a real strong back. You know, and as we were talking earlier, we're maybe past it a little bit. But the next body of water that you've got is you're going to see is another sea loch which is called Loch Long, translates from the Gaelic as Loch of the Boats, because it is attached, it's connected to the Atlantic Ocean. And so in years gone by, my Swedish friends behind me would have been sailing up from the Atlantic Ocean on their Viking longships, and they would have been sailing up Loch Long. Now, I mentioned Loch Lomond's actually quite close to the coast. Once we get to the town of the village of Arica, which sits at the head of Loch Long, we're only actually about a mile across land from Loch Lomond. So what the Vikings used to do is they used to sail their ships, their long ships, from the Atlantic up Loch Long, and then they would transport them over land, a distance of about a mile, into the fresh waters of Loch Lomond. Now Loch Lomond has a long history of religion. So there were many very poorly protected religious communities that lived not just around Loch Lomond but in the various islands on the loch itself. And these religious communities were rich pickings for the Vikings. You know, normally pretty poorly defended, but full of treasure, silver and gold, and works of art. And so the Vikings would transport their longboats overland into Loch Lomond, where they would just spend days raiding around the various religious communities and settlements around the loch, plundering for treasure. Now, this might be of particular interest to my Swedish friends, but there's a lovely little church in the village of Lust that we're going to. And the church itself's not particularly old, probably a couple of hundred years, but the graveyard is ancient. And in the graveyard you will find, dating from the 1200s, a Viking burial site, which is marked with what they call a hogback stone. So this is a lump of stone. To the uninitiated it might look like it's representing a big loaf of ground bread or something like that, but if you look closely, it's carvings on the side of it, and this hogback stone is said to represent a Viking longhouse. Now, why was this Viking buried in a Christian burial ground? Well, it's quite possible that by the 1200s this was a Viking that had adopted Christianity, but had chosen to be buried underneath a Viking hogback stone, because like many of the early Christians in Scotland, they did embrace Christianity, but in many cases many people held on to their old way of doing things, their own belief systems. And for hundreds of years you see this amalgamation of old beliefs and early sort of Christianity. So it may be that he was a Christian buried in a Christian grave, but buried under a Viking hogback stone, just to hedge his bets in case his new Christian faith was not all it cracked up to be in the afterlife. The Viking longhouse is representative of what the Vikings, I believe, in the north believed as an afterlife, an honourable afterlife. When they died, perhaps in battle or with honour, they would go to Valhalla, where they would spend their days fighting at war with each other. And when the day's fighting was over, they would go back to Odin's longhouse, where they would feast and drink and make merry all night, and then head off onto the battleground in the morning with raging hangovers to take out their aggression. And that would be their great life throughout all eternity. And I believe that's what the representation of the Viking longhouse on the gravestone is said to represent. But yeah, if you're interested in that, head off to the church and see if you can locate this Viking grave marker. left actually. You see just the tip, the peak of Ben Lomond. It's the mountain from which the loch takes its name. This is Loch Lomond on your left here. And yeah, Ben Lomond's one of the higher mountains in the Southern Highlands. We're not that far really from the Highland line here, but probably one of the most climbed mountains in all of Scotland because of its proximity to the city of Glasgow. We're probably only about an hour's drive, if that, from Glasgow. But again, just clear days, absolutely spectacular views from up there, being so close as we are to the west coast. really high, so I don't know if maybe there'll be much of a beach there, but hopefully you should be able to take a stroll along the beach. Now the public right now, must admit I've not been here for a good few weeks, and I don't know what sort of winter timings people are on. But basically the building immediately over there, and basically other side of that bus, that is the public restrooms. I would say probably, if you're looking to use them, head there first, just in case they shut early. I'll go and double check the times just for future reference. They do charge you 50 pence to use these ones. You just tap your card, it's all contactless. Stuff your pockets full of toilet roll whilst you're in there, get your money's worth. You're going to pay 50 pence for it. If you go past the restrooms and turn left down the main street, that'll take you down to the pier. You can walk out onto the pier. If you look in that direction, look for the church steeple if you're looking to find the Viking grave and churchyard. But listen, we've got 30 minutes here, so I'll just see you back in the bus in 30 minutes, and then that should get us back into Edinburgh around about 6:30. But just be prepared for a long drive after this one, okay?
You said 30.
Excellent.
Alright, we're gonna pay to go to the bathroom. And then where are you going? Down the path?
Jacobite cause never rears its head ever again. And that was the end of it. But anyway, the period of history that we're concerned with, the occurrence that we're interested in, is the period when Bonnie Prince Charlie is retreating back across the border from England into Scotland. Because when he does so in the west of the country through a town called Carlisle, which is just on the south side of the Anglo-Scottish border. And when Bonnie Prince Charlie passed through Carlisle, he left some men to defend the town, to help to protect his retreat back up into Scotland. And this is what these soldiers bravely did. They tried to defend Carlisle, which was defended by a medieval castle, but this castle was no match for the modern might and artillery of the British military back in 1745. And when the British arrived, the town and the castle quickly fell. Those survivors inside that survived were taken prisoner. Now, because there were Jacobite sympathisers all over the UK, even though they hadn't been involved in fighting, the British government were rounding these people up en masse, where they were being arrested, thrown into prison cells, many receiving very quick trials, prosecuted, sent to jail, hanged, sent off to the colonies and indentured servitude, that sort of thing. And so jails throughout Britain were filling up fast. And the same was true in Carlisle, where these Jacobite prisoners had been taken. Now, as was the case then and still is the case now, sadly, particularly during periods of civil war, it seems that bitterness runs very deep, and it's quite often, it's quite common for, I think we see around the world just now, for captors to play very cruel games or give very cruel treatment to their prisoners. And 18th century Britain was no different. And so it was on one occasion when two brothers who originated on the banks of Loch Lomond for a settlement on the other side of Loch Lomond, who were sharing a prison cell, received a visit from their jailers. And these jailers came into the brothers' prison cell, and they told these brothers that they had some good news and some bad news for them. Now, the good news was that the prison was filling up and they needed the space. So in the morning they were going to release one of the brothers without charge. He would be free to leave, free to go home in peace, all was forgiven. The bad news they told these two brothers was that we are running out of space and we need the cell. So in the morning we're going to execute the other one of you for treason. And it's up to you two brothers to decide between yourselves who gets to live and who is going to die. Now, perhaps these jailers hoping for some blood sport as these two brothers bitterly fought it out for survival. I don't know that. I don't have any brothers. I've got two older sisters, but I know a lot of people that have brothers, and I know it's quite common for these brothers not to like each other very much. I don't know if that's true, if you've got experience of that, I'm not sure. But perhaps this is what the guards were hoping. They were to be very disappointed, however, because these two brothers did love each other very, very much. They had grown up together, they had fought together, and they had been prepared to die together. So rather than fight it out for survival, the two brothers did the opposite. They argued as to who should be the one to have the honour of dying on behalf of their sibling. Now, the older brother, who was a good few years older, argued that he should be the one to die. He had lived a longer life, he had lived a fuller life, he had known the great joy of meeting someone and falling in love and being married. He had known the great joy of at least seeing his children being born and enjoying the first few years of their life with him. And he argued that he wanted this for his younger brother. Allow me to die, you go free, go home, live a long life, live a good life, find love in whatever way that might be, and live a good life. The younger brother, of course, argued the complete opposite. He had nothing to go home to, no one waiting for him. Therefore, he should be the one to die. You have a wife and children waiting for you at home. Goodness knows what's coming for the Highland people if Bonnie Prince Charlie's uprising is unsuccessful. Therefore, you go home, go in peace, see your loved ones again, be there to protect them and look after them in the years to come. And so supposedly long into the night, these two brothers argued with each other until perhaps at some point falling into a restless sleep. And in the morning, supposedly, the younger brother awakens from his slumber to find that he is alone. And the night, his eldest brother has quietly summoned the prison guards and asked to be taken away, so that in the morning he might go to his own execution without further protest from his younger brother. And whether there was a message inscribed in the wall, or whether there was a note passed on from another prisoner, or a message passed on verbally from a prison guard, we don't know. But essentially this is the message that he's giving to his brother. And that, although his greatest regret is that he will never return home to his place of his birth, he will never share a tender embrace or a true love's kiss with his sweetheart ever again. This is the gift that he's giving to his younger brother, this gift of life. So he said to his brother, you take the high road. Now the high road is the road that we're taking today. The road through fields, past rivers, across rivers, past lochs, over mountain passes. The road of the living. The high road was known as the road of the living. Now for his saying his young brother, you take the high road. He on the other hand would be taking a different path. He would be taking what was known as the low road. And in the ancient Gaelic culture, there was a commonly held belief amongst the Highland clans that if you were a Highlander to die in a foreign land, then on your death your soul would be instantly transported along what was known as the low road, the road of the afterworld, the afterlife, the road of the underworld, and your soul would be carried back to the place that you held dearest in your heart. So therefore he's saying, you take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be waiting for you in spirit when you return home. So supposedly the inspiration for the very poignant lyrics of the song. And despite its sad origins, this is actually a song that is very popular in Scotland. Various versions of it have been recorded, and largely now it's used as a song of national pride and celebration that you hear played over the tannoy at the start of national sporting events, and also bizarrely, despite its origins, a song which has become very, very popular to be played at Scottish weddings as well. And the bonny banks of Loch Lomond. Now, as you probably see as we travel now around you, the landscape has changed once more, so we are back in the lowlands of Scotland. It is clearing up though, so you should get a decent view of the Highland line, which is this ridgeline of mountains that's going to be running on our left hand side for about the next 30 or 40 minutes. Yeah, relax and enjoy this lovely bit of countryside, and 30 to 40 minutes we'll be hitting. The River Forth north of Edinburgh is about 5 miles wide, and the river, once it actually reaches its estuary into the North Sea, it gets up to about 13 miles wide. If we want to get across it from Edinburgh, we have to drive about 10 miles west of the city, where the river narrows to about 1.5 miles wide, and there we've got 3 quite magnificent bridges that we can use to get across the water. We might see those today on our way back into Edinburgh, depending on traffic. But in this area, the area around Stirling Castle, the river's very modest. It's only about 20 to 30 metres wide, and so Stirling Castle basically protects or guards what's known as the lowest bridging point of the river. This is the lowest point on the river where you can build a bridge, or in years gone by, in more sort of historic times before the modern engineering of the kind of 19th century. This was really the lowest point in the river that you could have built a bridge across the River Forth before it effectively becomes too wide, before it becomes tidal or becomes as it's known as the Firth of Forth. So if you look at the shape of Britain, you'll see that if you've ever got invading armies coming from the south, just the way that Britain is shaped, whether it was the Angles years gone by, or maybe the Romans, or whether it was the medieval English armies or what have you. If you're marching an army from the south, at some point you're going to have to cross the River Forth, and it's too wide to cross to the east. So if you're an army invading to the north and you want to conquer the north of Britain or the north of Scotland, this is the only real point you can cross the River Forth, and Stirling Castle protects that crossing point. And so for that reason, the old saying was, if you held Stirling Castle, you quite literally held the keys to Scotland. You could not hope to completely cement your dominance on the country, or hope to control it completely, unless you held this one particular kind of castle. And so for that reason, it's a castle that's been fought over many times over the millennia, over the century. Again, most notably, sorry to go back to during the first wars of independence, during the campaigns of William Wallace and Robert the Bruce for dominance firstly to expel English occupying armies, but secondly for dominance of the country as well. So it was between these two landmarks, the Wallace Monument and Stirling Castle. The River Forth flows between these two monuments, and it was on the banks of that river in the year 1297 that this early resistance leader William Wallace and another man called Andrew Murray won the first decisive victory over the English occupying armies in pitch battle at what became known as the Battle of Stirling Bridge. So William Wallace is commemorated in this stone monument, which was built probably a couple of hundred years ago. A lot of money from North America, I believe, was raised to fund the building of that monument. But if you have seen the movie Braveheart, and I appreciate it's getting on a bit now, it's about 30 years old, the movie. But if you, and again, it's very dramatised. There's a lot of, historically, there's a lot of it's kind of quite make-believe in some respects. But basically, if you watch the movie again, every major battle fought in that movie, in real life, was fought in the shadow of this castle. So important was it, so important was it for the control of the country. Yeah, well worth a visit. You're not actually seeing the most attractive side of it. If you get to we're looking at it from the south. If you go to the east of the north elevation, you get some of the more beautiful kind of early Renaissance architecture that Castle tends to be kind of known for, essentially. Up at that wall, I'll tell you, if you look up at that very high wall, that sheer volcanic cliff face on top of which it sits, on this side of the what makes it a funny story, otherwise we probably wouldn't share it on the bus. But despite all the tales of battles and bloodshed, my favourite hero of Stirling Castle is this particular historical figure, who was known as John Damien, the Birdman of Stirling Castle. So if you'll indulge me, I'll tell you that story. So John Damien was a 16th century Italian chemist, of all things, and he was active during the reign of a king of Scotland called James IV. Now James IV ruled Scotland from about, I'm going to guess 1470 through to about, well I know exactly, 1513, because that's when he died. And like many of his ancestors, he died a premature violent death, this time leading an invasion of England in the year 1513. But during his reign, he was a relatively successful monarch. He ruled over a period of relative peace and prosperity for Scotland. And James IV became known as the Renaissance King. And he was very keen to turn the royal court of Scotland into the envy of Europe in terms of cutting edge science and technology and the arts and all that kind of thing. And so, you know, he invited apparently great minds from all over Europe to come and join his royal court and to share their knowledge. And so many people apparently from across Europe did answer his call. You know, scientists and doctors and architects, philosophers, musicians, you know, all sorts of people came in order to study and work in the royal court of James IV, and contribute to the, you know, this the fortunes of this relatively small but ambitious nation. And apparently one of his favourites at court was an Italian alchemist or chemist called John Damien. And John Damien sounds like he would have been a good fun guy to have around on a night out. You know, I'm sure we've all got friends like this, the kind of person you get a couple of drinks into them and you can get them to do pretty much anything. You know, the life and soul of the party until it all goes horribly wrong. And so John Damien sounds like this kind of guy, but one of the reasons, the other reasons that the king was fond of it, was that John Damien, being a chemist, had convinced the king that he was working on a new chemical process that would allow him to turn base metals into solid gold. Okay, so you imagine this technology at the hands of a medieval Scottish king. This is a game changer. You take a lump of lead or whatever, which is not insignificant in value, and you turn it into solid gold. Bingo, jackpot. This is going to readdress the balance of power not only in Britain but in Europe. You know, endless supplies of wealth on tap. And so the king became a great patron of John Damien's. He gave him all the money and resources that he required to continue with his experiments. And by all accounts, John Damien lived a very extravagant lifestyle at the king's expense. You know, he had a very fine apartments up in Stirling near the castle. He wore the finest of clothes. He ate well, he drank well, lived the life of a celebrity essentially. But as you can imagine, as time passes on, this guy's getting absolutely nowhere with this new chemical process he's trying to master. So apparently after some time, the king starts to lose patience with this Italian chemist. You know, this is costing him a lot of money, but he's seeing no results despite the expenditure. So John Damien apparently, realising that he's on borrowed time here, decides that one last roll of the dice is necessary. And so he speaks again to the king and he explains that he is indeed close head cantilever style bridge. This is the railway bridge that crosses the water. This is called the fourth bridge, and that is 19th century. So sort of 3 generations of bridge, if you will, all spanning the same stretch of water, sitting next to each other, which apparently is